So I want to begin my presentation first by, humbly thanking you for inviting us to be here today. We wouldn't be here at the Tribby or even at Shell Point without the support of the Village Church, from the support and the gifts from Gary and Rebecca Reynolds, and the help and support that we've also received from Marge Lee, who is the museum curator, of course, at the Tribby. And so I'm so grateful to be here and thankful that you have invested in us, and I hope now that we can share some of those stories. So as I was preparing for the presentation, one of the things that came up for me time and time again as I was thinking about sharing the stories of the art is that in order to understand the artwork, we really need to understand the person behind it, of course. And part of that reality of that person is that the people in our program are imprisoned. It's the Prison Art Project. And so the U.S. locks up more people than any other nation in the world at the staggering rate of 573 per 100,000 residents. That's 1.9 million people who are incarcerated nationwide. So this number is slightly lower than we have had in the past. It's usually around 2 million, 2.2 million. It's only slightly lower because of COVID and the reality of being so closely confined. But the reason why this affects so many people is because despite the issue of mass incarceration in the United States and the sheer number of prisons and the issue of loneliness and pain that's so prevalent in these environments, there's still a tremendous amount of loneliness despite how many people are there. And this really does affect the themes and the motivations behind the artwork that's shared. And so this is a quote that really stuck with me from an artist named Carmine. He shares, "I cannot describe the feeling of jail and the truly hopeless, helpless feeling that pervades this place. Yet through it all, God is there." And this is the artist who couldn't get a photograph of himself to share, so he did a self-portrait. He's also the artist behind the piece that was titled "One Nation Under God," which I believe was featured in the Shell Point Life magazine. And so these are all kind of statements and contexts to the artists that we have in our gallery, in our collection. And their perspectives and their backgrounds are so important to understanding the themes behind the artwork. And so now I want to invite Robert, who is a former student in our Crossroads program and also currently a Crossroads employee, to share some of those experiences that will paint that picture of who the men and women that we serve are.
Happy Friday to everyone here.
Being on staff today with Crossroads and having the opportunity to share with you is truly a privilege. 12 years ago, I was in the middle of serving a 5-year prison sentence for drug charges in the state of Nevada. While this was far from a pleasant experience, it was where God got a hold of me. I never gave much thought to handwriting letters before going to prison, but as soon as I arrived there, I saw just how powerful they are and just how much weight that those letters carry. In our unit where I was, the mail would be handed out to us together in a group, and there was expectations on many of the guys' faces. But there was also a sense of sadness that was definitely evident there. I don't know the exact statistics, but I am going to say that better than half of the men that were imprisoned there with me never received any mail, period. As a Crossroads student, I cherished the letters of encouragement that were being sent into me and that I received, and I was always impacted by the fact that a complete stranger took the time out of their day and their busy life to write me. I shared the details of getting involved with Crossroads with many men during my sentence, and I love seeing how it changed them. These pieces of art that are on display here today are that person's way of saying thank you and their way to express themselves and the change that has happened in their life. Some of these paintings represent months of work, planning and preparation to even be able to send it out of the prison. So on behalf of those students that are in prison, that are involved with the Prison Art Project, I would like to extend my deepest appreciation to you today for just making this all possible. Behind each one of those pieces, there is a human being that was created in the image of God. And creating the art and sharing it with you is just one small way for them to express their gratitude and share their story. Before I flew down here, my mom reminded me of how much some of the things I used to make meant to her, and that she still kept many of them as a reminder of the journey that God has taken us on. This little handmade dream catcher that I made is made from scraps of things that I was able to find. But it was made with love, and it was one way for me to express appreciation for my family and how they supported me through this time. Many of these pieces of art have followed this same journey today, and I want to thank you for supporting the arts, the students who create it, and Crossroads Prison Ministries. Thank you for allowing me to share.
So as Robert referenced, he was in our program. And so Crossroads Prison Ministries is our main ministry. The Art Project is a subsidiary of that. The main ministry, if you're not familiar with it, is a Bible study correspondence program in which we connect men and women on the outside with men and women on the inside through Bible studies where they're able to go through this lesson together and where Christ-centered relationships are formed. And through that, lives are changed. And so now going into the Art Project, some of our history may surprise you. The Art Project really began over 30 years ago when our ministry began, and we started receiving creations in maybe some of the more unlikely places. It began on the envelopes that actually carried the Bible studies themselves. So this is a collection of a few of those examples, and these are some of my favorites that I have here in my hands. And so it began over 30 years ago when some of our Crossroads staff realized, there's something special going on here. Despite the limited resources, there were men and women wanting to express themselves and share a bit of themselves in any way that they could find. And that just so happened to be, again, on the envelopes that carried the Bible studies themselves. So that's another close-up of one of my favorites. This is a full acrylic painting on this envelope that somehow made it through the mail. For the Florida fishermen here. And then just a beautiful watercolor piece as well. And so the reality of being in a mail correspondence ministry also gives opportunity for fun pieces like this, where, as Robert shared, there is a desire to create, an unconfined creativity, and part of that is finding any sort of material that you can to fashion beauty. And so this piece is one of my favorites because it's just so everyday in the sense that it's made of those bread bag ties, and yet they've created a beautiful cross that's kind of knit together and woven together. This next piece is another favorite of mine. It's just a few what looks like pieces of wood and glue and stonework to create a window and a cross. And so, like I said, with it being kind of confined through the mail, the reality is also that everything that comes in through our office doors doesn't always come in one piece. That's kind of the constraints that we work in, but what's beautiful is that through that as well, there's quite a lot that can happen, and the gallery that we have today is a prime example of that. So now looking at the artwork itself, one of the themes that we kind of developed as we corresponded with our students is that the artwork is really representative of the transformation that is happening in the lives of men and women in prison. And if you get a chance to go through the gallery, there's wonderful signage that really explains that. And if you're familiar with someone in prison, or anyone that's served time, they'll share that prison isn't a place that's engineered for community. It's often a place that's built where cells are segmented. Loneliness and separation is kind of a commonplace thing. And so when someone has the opportunity to partake in the arts and express themselves as an artist, they go against the grain of the environment that they're in. The environment that they're in of prison might be telling them, you are your crime, you are your prison ID number, and you are nothing. But when someone partakes in artwork and partakes in our Bible study lessons, they begin to see that they are also made in the image of God. And through that transformation takes place. And so the artist that I want to particularly highlight, his name is Mike. He's got a few pieces in the gallery. And I want to read his letter because it's particularly profound where it speaks to that transformation. And then we'll go look at a few of his pieces that he has also created. So Mike is an acrylic painter from Wisconsin, and he shares, I came to prison in 2012. I figured out real fast that the word correctional in the name of my new home could not be further from its true meaning. Although the devastation I have brought to my family is the worst consequence of prison, this is a very bad place to be. And this is further amplified if you have too much time on your hands. And unfortunately, there is not much else. I always believed in God, but never took the time to find out who Jesus really is, or to study the words in the Bible. But I got a Bible and began to learn God's truth one verse at a time. And not long after my Bible studies began, I felt inspired to pick up a paintbrush for the first time. I knew nothing about painting, but was starving for color and scenery beyond the walls of this place. I began to study and practice painting one stroke at a time. And after 3 years of diligent Bible studies and countless hours and tubes of paint, I will soon be able to go home with the skills I need to enjoy my newfound loves, which were in me the whole time: God and painting, Bible and brush. So this is that art piece that corresponds to that letter. And so it's titled One Day at a Time, a representation of Mike's journey as he went through his Bible studies and also refined this craft that was in him the whole time, painting and his artistic works. Another piece that you'll see in the gallery is that there's quite a lot of religious imagery. And again, that's tied to what we do as a ministry that is founded in the Bible and sharing those truths. This piece is called The Belly of the Beast. Again, another acrylic painting. And you'll see the parallels between Jonah's time in the whale and just the entire composition that you have here. One of my favorite details in this piece is that in the mass, you can see a gold cross kind of tucked away very, very, very refinedly. Another piece that we have from Mike is this piece that was just titled Ruth. And it's, again, just another beautiful depiction of that story. This is one of my favorite pieces because every so often at Crossroads, if we're invited to a place like this, we'll sometimes correspond with a few artists where we'll challenge them to create something that's in relationship to the place that we'll be presenting. And so Crossroads was invited to a conference ground in Michigan called Maranatha Bible Mission Conference Grounds. And we asked our students to create something inspired by the Lake Michigan lake shore. And we sent these artists reference images because with the reach of our ministry, we have no idea where some of our artists may be from. They may not have ever seen one of the Great Lakes or even the ocean or a large body of water for that matter. And so what's special about this piece is called Without Excuse, is because this is the letter that he sent. You see that reference image that he sent back. The resemblance between the painting that he did and the reference image is so uncanny in terms of similarities. He sent this 3 days after I had sent him the letter. And he had said that he had been working on it for months and that it was just intended for us to have it. So another special example of how God is working through the lives of the men and women we serve in very small but profound ways. And so it's titled Without Excuse because it is correlating to the Bible verse in Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Our next theme, which I think is a very apparent one and very clear throughout the entire gallery, is that prison artwork has the power to transport. And what that speaks to is the reality that prison is a place where you are locked away. And so out of being locked away, there is a desire to be elsewhere. And what prison artwork does is it provides that freedom where someone might be able to explore their imagination, someone might be able to connect to a past memory, and someone might be able to escape in that way. And so what we find is a lot of art artists enjoy their artwork and their craft so much because of that hope and that ability to transport through it. And so this next artist that I want to share, his name is Sean, out of Wisconsin as well. He's an acrylic painter. And this is maybe a more of a harder letter to read, but it points to the reality again of how prison impacts an individual. So he shares, feeling helpless, all alone and desperate, I started watching Bob Ross on PBS. Such a soothing voice, such a wonderful man. He kept saying, "You too can paint." And a year ago, I bought a cheap paint set, and the rest is history. I donate all of my paintings to strangers, family, friends, and organizations that do great things with the proceeds. And I love it when someone writes and says, "Wow, your painting looks like a photograph. I bought a frame and hung it on my wall, and yeah, that makes me feel really good. I'm pretty sure that I will die in prison. Every night as I fall asleep, I pray that God or grandma or grandpa, anybody up there, would come and get me, take me while I sleep. But I wake up in the morning to screaming in my intercom, count time, and my heart slams in my chest from the cruel awakening, and my day begins again, a day full of torture and heartache. I don't know what my purpose in life is at the moment, and I just don't understand, but painting helps a lot." And so from the subject matter of Sean, you really do see the influence of Bob Ross. And Sean especially loves to do landscapes. Again, speaking to that desire to escape the current environment that he's in. And so one of my favorite details in a lot of his pieces is how he does those trees. And I, again, think of Bob Ross, where he shares about the happy little trees. This is another beautiful piece that he has. And then this one struck me just because I never would have thought you could use the color purple to depict a winter scene. So again, you can see those trees that just have such depth and texture to it. The final theme that I want to share is that prison artwork has the power to translate. And again, the reality of prison is that it's a part of brokenness that someone has been an experience of. And what that means and what that can become is that it can be difficult to express yourself. It can be difficult to be listened to or heard. Often when someone's in prison, they've left behind brokenness of some sort, whether that's through family, whether that's through the crime that they've committed. And so prison artwork has the power to translate because it provides a platform in which someone is able to share who they are and their story, despite the circumstances that they may be in. The artist that I want to highlight is Daniel. And he just has such a beautiful way of sharing his story and what it means to be in the art project. So Daniel was a graphite illustrator out of North Carolina, and this is what he says. When we are born into life, I see it as God giving each of us a brand new sheet of paper. And that represents our lives. And given this clean sheet to draw on, we try to produce a worthy design to the best of our own abilities. But as we grow older, we make many mistakes in the artwork, and we try to erase them over and over, redrawing our lines. The paper becomes torn in trying to fix our mistakes, and at some point we step back to look at the paper, our life, and notice all the wear on it. Seeing scribbles here and there, with everything unorganized, we tend to get frustrated. But eventually, as we think about giving up, we cry out to God, and he introduces us to his son, Jesus Christ. Jesus kindly explains how he came upon a particular tree with 3 distinctive holes in it. And he used this tree to make this endless stock of brand new paper, clean and white as snow. And what is even better is that he gives it to anyone who wants a new sheet of their own for free. Excited, we obtain this new sheet to replace our old, worn-out one. However, as we begin to draw again, this time it's different, because now we allow God to guide our hands in our artwork. And as any loving father would do, he gently wraps his hands around ours in our artwork and guides us. This time when we make mistakes, he uses his own special eraser and easily erases our mistakes. And together, we produce our finest work, life as God intended. So this is one of my favorites from Daniel. It's entitled, Even Kings Pray. Daniel also is a fan of NASCAR, and so to be honest with you, I am not sure which racer this is. There you go. And then this is a piece that Daniel did specifically for us. He works on any kind of paper, but also in the commissary, in the stores within prison walls, you're able to purchase handkerchiefs, which he purchases for 97 cents and is able to do beautiful things with just a ballpoint pen. And so you can see the attribution here with Crossroads on the bottom, and yeah, this was done on a handkerchief. So I'd like to take a moment now for our wonderful attendees to ponder again the meaning behind these shattered pieces of pottery. As I shared earlier, these remnants of clay pots came to us broken in the mail. And for many of the men and women in our program that we serve, this image is very reflective of them. Whether that's brokenness and loss from the crimes that they may have committed, whether that's from the severed relationships from family, or even how they may view themselves. In Psalm 31, David laments, "I have become like broken pottery." And this is the reality for all of us. But through Christ, we can come to find healing and restoration. And so we're particularly proud of these pots in the gallery that's showcased today, because these pots are those shattered pieces that you've seen. But these pots are actually recreated through an ancient Japanese art form called kintsugi. And it's the practice of taking broken pieces of pottery and actually bringing them back together with gold lacquer. And often in their culture, they perceive this as having more value than when the vessel wasn't broken. And so it's a beautiful picture, again, of the transformation that we experience and the healing that we experience, not only through the recognition of being made in the image of God and being in a space where you're able to embrace the unconfined creativity that we all share, but it also speaks to 2 Corinthians 5:17, which says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come." And so I pray that today, as you are hearing these words in this presentation, you are able to touch that and experience that yourself. And when you go see the gallery as well, you're able to see the stories of the men and women that we're serving and how that's happening to them as well. So I'd just like to close now with opening up the space for any questions that you may have, or if you'd like to see any images again. It's all here live just next door as well, but I'm very grateful again for the opportunity to present, and thank you again for listening.